Okay, so let me just share.
Yeah, he's running. My granddaughter works for 4-H and the cooperative extension. That's her mother, and this is my sister.
So it's a family affair. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But we all do some homesteading, and we all do
Oh, that's your phone.
gardening.
Oh yes, sorry. I did silence it though.
So maybe
That's
I'll do a quick introduction.
Okay, sure.
So thank you for coming. I met you all when you came in, but I'm Shannon Reno. I do the Master Gardener program coordinating here. So I work with all of our volunteers. I'm excited to help them just sign people in for the leaf class and get to enjoy listening about mushrooms. So we do have a schedule. I think this is maybe our first one of the series for fall. We do have a list of other ones coming up. So if you're interested in joining any others, I have a list in the back. And I'll turn it over to you, Emilie. Introduce yourself.
So my name is Emilie Barnett. I have been a classroom teacher for 19 years. My husband, about 3 years ago, decided to start growing mushrooms at home, and it started off as just like a fun project. We've been foraging for mushrooms for about 14 years now. We started off with like the simple easy 5, your chicken in the woods, your puffballs, that type of thing. And then we got deeper and deeper into it. And now I've eaten over 100 different varieties of wild mushrooms right here from Western New York and Chautauqua and Cattaraugus County. And then we grow about 15 different varieties of mushrooms at home. And we started it as a commercial business about a year ago. Actually, June 30th was our 1-year anniversary as a business. It really, like I said, we've been doing it for 3 years, and it started off as a, hey, let's just grow them for ourselves. And then it started off, we have too much, let's give them away. And then people were like, well, can I give you money for it? And we're like, not really. So then we decided to start ourselves our own business. So that's how it became Barnett's Mushrooms. But yeah, so we specialize in saprophytic mushrooms, which is just a fancy way of saying we do the ones that grow on wood. There's a lot more information here, and please feel free to read it. I'm not a screen reader. I just want to talk about it real fast. Pictured over there is one of our chicken of the woods vines. It's one of my favorite saprophytic mushrooms. It grows on wood, but it starts its life actually inside of a living tree. It does not start in a dead tree. You mostly do find it on fallen trees, but it isn't until that tree has fallen that the chicken of the woods will actually give out a fruiting body. I see a lot of advertisements about being able to grow chicken of the woods because it is a saprophytic mushroom. And as I said, that's what I specialize in. I am dubious of it. We have not tried it. And my friends who have tried it through different avenues have all had no success. Because it is a very long-term mushroom. It also will typically appear in the same spots over and over again. But yeah, most of the mushrooms that we eat are in the saprophytic family, saprophytic family, because they tend to be the widest ranging. It's got the most nutrients to be able to eat. It's eating the dead leaf litter. It's eating the fallen trees. It's eating what's available in the forest. Yeah, so like I said, it's just one of my favorites. I absolutely love it. I think it's beautiful. Any questions about chicken of the woods before I move on, or what type of, yeah, please.
Are chicken of the woods prevalent in our area?
Yes, yeah. Actually, we've really found Chautauqua County even more so than Cattaraugus County, and we would have thought it would have been the other way around. We're from Cattaraugus originally, and so we know those woods very well. And we do have a couple of places where we find them constantly, but Chautauqua County has really surprised us with how many there are. They typically grow on fallen oak or fallen black cherry. That seems to be what it likes the best. You will find them on hemlock. It's a different, that's why when I did this, I put species rather than a specific one, because there are 3 different varieties that grow in this area. There is one that'll grow on hemlock. Some people say that one's poisonous. It just causes them discomfort. All wild mushrooms, I will always say, any mushroom really, eat a little bit, try it if you know that what it is, and then move forward with eating a large amount. Like there are certain mushroom puffball. Puffball is something that people widely eat and don't have issues with. However, I can't eat the skin. I have to peel off the skin before I can eat the puffball, or I will get stomach upset. My husband can't eat honey mushrooms, the honey ring mushrooms. If he eats those, he gets a stomach upset. So, but I can eat them just fine. Our daughter can eat them just fine. So everybody's different. So always, like any other food, try a little before you eat a lot. And also really know what you're talking about. Okay, but no, they're very common around here. I have a lot of friends that are like, send me pictures and they're like, what is this, Emilie? And I'm like, chicken of the woods.
I've heard of them before, and I've heard that, you know, chefs in big restaurants and stuff absolutely love them, and I wasn't sure if I've ever seen them or if I would ever see them.
Oh yeah, you'll definitely see them. And now that you've seen a picture of them,
Yeah.
you'll be like, oh, I saw that. I see them all the time. This is still the season for them. They do still occasionally come this late. But mostly we find them typically in around July, August, September. That seems to be their favorite. But this year we actually found one in May. It was the earliest we've ever found one. Yeah, so it's just an interesting little creature there. Seems to really like I said, down trees. You'll find it on logs that are already fallen. But it starts its life cycle inside of a living tree. Here are another saprophytic mushroom that we often collect. These are the oyster family. So these are in the family Phlorodus, the genus, excuse me. I always do that. I always say family when I mean genus. Sorry, my science teacher would be having a hissy fit. So they're Phlorodus. These are Ostriatus. This is actually an example of that. So this is a Phlorodus Ostriatus that my husband cloned. Like I said before, I am a classroom teacher and I like to teach science for fun in summer school. I'm actually an English as a second language teacher. It's my first or second certification. My first one's Spanish. But for fun, I'm allowed to teach something outside of my content area in the summer, K to 5. And I have children, you know, in all those grade levels, plus some of the special needs kids. And when we were out on the nature trail, just observing nature, because that's usually what I do with the special needs kids, one of them was like, oh my God, Miss Barnett, what's that? And it was a giant oyster that was growing on the nature trail at Southwestern. And it had been a terrible drought. It was that July we had 2 years ago where there was no rain. And so I brought it home because that sounded like a good mushroom to have in our bank. And so my husband was able to clone it. And that's why it has this really unique rosetting on it, is because now it's getting all the humidity it needs. It's getting a good healthy food source. And so that's why it looks so different than the pictures up here. This is just an internet picture. And at the end of it, I'll give the websites where I stole pictures from. But this is actually one that we took of a fallen log in Long Point. We don't harvest from Long Point because that's a public park. You're not allowed to do that for selling purposes, but you know, if you grab a few for your pocket, that is allowed as long as it's for your own consumption only. But they were just prolific this year. I had friends that I went on their property and we picked 20 pounds in one day. They were incredibly prolific this year. They are fairly easy to identify. And like I said, these do grow on wood. So again, it's that saprophytic, it's dead, dying wood. In the springtime, you will see them on standing trees. They like everything from oak to maple to locust to, I found them on willow. I'm very good friends with the Vanstroms, the ones that do the meat over in Mud Creek Road. And they called me, they're like, oh my God, I think we have oysters on our willow trees. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Oysters on willow? I don't think so. And I got there and sure enough, that's exactly what they were. So oysters love everything. They're an equal opportunity consumer. There are a lot of different varieties of oysters. We have cloned, like I said, we have this one we call our summer oyster because I found it in the summer. And then we also have our falcon oyster. And that one, I have the exact birth date of that one. I remember that. I was out walking the dog on December 3rd in Faulkner. And one of my neighbors on a maple tree had a beautiful cluster of oysters. And so I asked, may I have it? gave it to me, and so we cloned that one just because it grew in cold weather climates. And as we get into this more, you'll see that these, even though I'm growing indoors, I'm not growing outdoors on logs, I'm growing indoors, these still have a season, even though they're inside a climate controlled area. Outdoors, you're going to fight with a lot of bugs and pests, and squirrels love mushrooms. Yes. So, and then I do have another couple of oyster species too, the golden and the blue. These are very common commercial ones that are readily available online for purchase. People sell them in all the different facets. But yeah, so that's just something special that we were able to do. And I am going to get into the cloning process of how we took samples from wild oysters to be able to clone them. One of our prides is our bear's head tooth. This is not a commonly available mushroom. It's also not commonly found in the wild. We had a log that gave us a nice group for about 3 years in a row when we were first starting to do our foraging, because like I said, we did that for so long before we started to try to grow them ourselves. And then it just went away and we lost it. And it also was very dirty. It always was very full of bugs. You can see here's a wild species and here's a wild species that I took pictures of. And you can see it just doesn't look as nice as the two that are over here that are actually grown inside. The bugs love them because there's lots of nooks and crannies. So they're always full of all kinds of centipedes and pill bugs and that kind of things. And then they also, because they're growing inside of a tree, these grow on living trees. They are full of little sawdust pieces and whatnot. So it takes quite a bit of cleaning to be able to consume them, and you end up losing quite a bit of it. So my husband took actually this very one, and this is the one that he cloned. Sorry, I don't remember that one's birthday, but that is the one that he cloned to get the one that we sell commercially now. And we've been using that same genetics this whole time in order to grow them ourselves. And this is their season. If you are lucky enough to find one, this is the time that you will be able to find one. And they're generally pretty high up in a tree, so high up that you might need a ladder. They like aspen. They like, my brain is not remembering the other type of wood. I can see it. It's gray. Sorry, that one left me. But anyways, they are small and they are absolutely delicious. They have a flavor similar to crab, kind of sweet, but still mushroomy. And actually my good friend who's a vegan, she uses them to make crab cakes. Am I going too fast? Okay. So now we're on to how we actually get our wild ones. And we continue a lot of our cultures this way. So we did purchase some of our cultures. We purchased our blue oyster culture. We purchased our lion's bane. We purchased our golden oysters, among some other ones that we have. Those are the only ones that we offer as grow kits. And the reason is because the other ones that we have are so finicky and we're still troubleshooting what's best for them. We are very picky about what our customers get versus what we're playing with at home. Part of the thing that I've absolutely loved about this is it's been one giant science experiment. We get to try new things. We get to do different things. We bounce ideas off each other. It is the dinner conversation almost nightly in our house, including our daughter. We have a daughter who, she'll tell you she hates mushrooms, but she loves them. She eats them and everything. And she goes traipsing around the woods with us, no problem. But she is a teenager, so, so this is how we do propagate our mushrooms to start, is we always are working with cloning. And the reason is we don't want to have that changing of the genetics. We found a mushroom that we like, so we're taking those genetics and we're replicating them. And we do that by placing it on an agar plate and then allowing the mycelial structure to grow off of that. So there's one more part of the mushroom life cycle that we're avoiding, and that's the hyphae, in which that's when they actually cross, and that would be the sexual reproduction. We avoid that. We keep maintaining the same genetics over and over again, and we do that by offering it different food substrates and just keeping it happy and healthy, so that then it doesn't wither and die on us. Now, is there a chance that that could happen eventually? Absolutely. And also you'd be shocked to see the variety that still comes out of doing only this cloning. Like I said, this right here, this is that first oyster that I showed you, that white oyster that has that beautiful, flowery like structure. This looks nothing like that, but that's the same kind of oyster. So the variation is still there despite the fact that you're not doing a sexual reproduction, you're doing an asexual reproduction. Contamination is probably our biggest thing. You would think these little buddies are growing out in the woods doing their, their thing without any human interaction whatsoever. But when you are doing it yourself, holy God, most of the mushroom growing is cleaning. That I would say probably 80% of what we do is cleaning, keeping everything as clean as possible. Everything is gloves. We wear masks while we're doing this. We just bought ourselves an overhead flow hood, like you would use in a medical setting, so that then we can go even further with it and keep it even cleaner than what we're doing now. 70% isopropyl alcohol is our best friend. We use it all the time. But yeah, so this circular pattern you see on all mushrooms. I have yet to find a mushroom that does not produce this circular pattern as it's growing out on the agar. It's just a unique piece of growing mushrooms that is really quite beautiful and stunning in my opinion. And this right here is actually a contamination that shouldn't be there. And so what we would do is we would just cut this leading edge and we put it on a new agar plate. Now, this is a cut off, put on an agar plate. And again, you see there's that circular pattern off of that agar. And actually these little lumps that you see are actual mushrooms trying to fruit, the fruiting body trying to come off of that agar. Mushrooms are all about keeping themselves alive. And if they think they can produce again, they can reproduce, they're going to try. So even in that tight little situation, they're still going to try to create a fruiting body. This is actually a lion's mane. That first one was an oyster. So I'm not hugely into all the different types of agar. And one of the reasons is I have celiac disease. So we had to find a specific agar that only comes from seaweed, because agar can come from a variety of sources. And we also can't do the grain water agar, the malt extract agar, because those both contain gluten. That's not saying mushrooms contain gluten. They don't. You are getting next to nothing when it comes to mushrooms, but I, living with it, can't because of my celiac disease. So I'm much more familiar with the potato water agar, the potato flake agar, and this fast growing agar. What we ended up going with was the potato flake agar. That's mostly what we use. We do occasionally go on this fast growing agar, and this is when we are trying to get our initial clone. So when we take and we are doing our first time, we usually do this because it'll get the mushrooms growing faster than the contaminants, if that makes sense. It's a race. Everything's a race when it comes to mushroom growing. And then this is the one that we use to maintain, once we know we have a clean culture, that's the one we use. However, most commercial growers are using that malt extract. It's cheaper, it's easier to use, and it's just much more prevalent. But I had to be a pain. Any questions about that? We do use glass trays, glass plates, because I also am a crazy environmentalist, and it kills me that we are using this much plastic in the plastic bag. So everywhere we can find something that is multiple use, we do. So all of our agar plates are done in glass petri dishes so that we can reuse them after a sterilization process. But most growers don't do that. Most growers use a plastic tray so that it's disposable, which also makes sense because you're doing this a lot. All right. Liquid cultures. This is how we actually started. We didn't start by trying to clone. That is much more advanced, and even most commercial growers do not do that. We're pretty unique in that sense, in that we can thank my husband for that one. He's the one who really wanted to play with that end of it. Most people will start with a commercially grown liquid culture. And this is where our lion's mane, our blue oysters, our golden oysters, Piopinos, black pearl kings, king oysters, trying to think of the rest of them. There's more pink oysters. A lot of them have all come from somebody else. You can get the syringes online. They're usually from $20 to $60 per syringe. Each syringe will get you enough to colonize a 5-pound grow bag of grain. That's not how we do our grain because we're not that big. A 5-pound block of grain will get you about 40 of these bad boys. So you don't need that much if you're just doing it for yourself. The syringes will hold in a fridge at that temperature, and they won't be indefinitely alive, but they will hold for a very long time. It's, just think of cold storage. You can expand these, and that's just another thing that we do. So once we bought those commercial strains, we expanded them in our own liquid culture. Most people who do a liquid culture do, again, that malt syrup. We couldn't, I'm not allowed to tell you what we use, but it's local. And it's mostly water. Okay, so you want some type of a sugar and some good clean water. And that is all you'll need to expand any of these liquid cultures that you would purchase online. We do also test our liquid cultures on agar, and that's what got my husband thinking, well, if we're testing these liquid cultures, then couldn't we just clone a mushroom and move our way through that way? So that was actually what triggered the whole cloning process for us. They do come in these syringes. They look just like a needle, but they're huge. And yes, and there's a reason that you have to have a needle, and I'm going to get to that next. Any questions on this before I continue? Okay. From a liquid culture, you're going to take it to a grain spawn. Now, there's a lot of different varieties of grain that are available. The most common one, and the one pictured here, which this is a picture I stole, this isn't mine, is the wheat berries. They're the cheapest amongst all of these. They're also some of the easiest ones to pasteurize. Bird seed is another close second to being really cheap, but the problem is it's so dirty. It is very hard to get clean and pasteurized and know that you're not going to have any contamination. So it's common and it's cheap, but it's probably the more difficult one. We have never tried, of course, the wheat berries or the brown rice. Or the rye, excuse me. We have tried brown rice, popcorn, and wild bird seed. They worked, but it wasn't what we would have liked. Like I said, I can't use wheat berries, and my husband asked me not to say what we do use, but it is a gluten-free grain. It's not oats either. Oats are too rich in nutrition, and you'll get to contamination too fast. So that's why oats aren't on there. All the rest of those, you notice they have a hard skin on them. The mushrooms like that because then that gives them something to break into and pull apart. They don't like it to be easy. We use the quart jars. That is exactly how ours look. And you can see there's this gray port up at the top. That's why you have your liquid cultures in an injectable state, because you are going to pierce that port with the needle and put in a certain amount of your liquid culture into your grain and then allow your mushrooms to cultivate that grain. We really recommend that you get the self-healing ports. We've used the cotton like that and had perfect success, no problems. We've recently switched over to a sticker that is almost like a Band-Aid is what it is. And that is just to allow all of this to breathe, because mushrooms like us breathe oxygen and produce CO2. So that was another big thing that we really struggled with at the beginning, was having too much CO2 in our house and in our grow rooms. We really had to dial in our fans, and it took a long time to figure that out. Now, I don't know if any of you are thinking about that, but if you are a grower of other herbal things, those love CO2. And so there are people who are doing that. In fact, Biodome does, because they grow mushrooms and they're also growing marijuana. And they do an exchange between the two rooms to just help, because it does really increase the yield on the marijuana, and it does give the mushrooms some nice fresh oxygen. So there are growers who are doing that. That's not us. We're just growing the mushrooms. And they are in those jars for 10 to 20 days. 10, we can even go as low as 7 really on a lot of our oysters. The 20 is much more for the hericiums, the lion's mane and the bear's head tooth. They need a lot longer to colonize. They have much wispier mycelium than the oyster mushrooms. This bad boy, I joke, should go to Mars, because when she colonizes something, she makes a brick out of it. And we have to shake our jars constantly, because it will just turn it into a solid mass, and you will not get it out of the jar. You will break the jar and it'll still be sitting there in a solid mass. So, and it just depends. Like I said, the hericiums, not so much. They're not as aggressive, whereas a lot of your oysters are way more aggressive, and it turns it basically into a rock. I'm going to continue. From the grain spawn, then we go to our blocks. Now, the substrate, as I said before, all of these mushrooms are saprophytic. They grow on wood. So our substrate is mostly wood sawdust, okay? Hardwood, not pine. You can use a mixture with some pine if that's all you can get, but just know that again kind of slows down a lot of the mushrooms, because they prefer that hardwood. There's also a little bit of supplementation with something else. People use a large variety of things, but the most common substrate is actually straw or hay. It's cheap, it's readily available, it contains gluten, so we can't use it. All of our mushrooms are grown strictly on wood. This bag is also pasteurized. We built a steam pasteurizer out of a 50-gallon drum, okay, a metal drum with just a water heater that we put into it. My husband put in and then sealed it up so that it wasn't leaking water anymore. We put it to a certain point in the water. It sits on a stand, and then we fill it with these blocks. Each one of our blocks we fill individually. We have our method of how much we use, and there are tutorials everywhere. Like, we didn't learn this by anybody teaching us. We learned this by watching videos and videos and videos and videos and deciding what we wanted to try. Like I said, the coolest thing about this is you get to constantly experiment and try new things. And so that's why he's like, don't tell them everything. And I'm like, okay, I won't tell them everything. But it's just, when we originally make the blocks, it's our wood sawdust, our nutritional supplement, and then water. And that's it. Then we seal the blocks. This patch that you can see right here is an air patch, because it needs to breathe. Well, I shouldn't say we seal it. We fold it up so that it seals itself, like a vacuum seal type of thing, while it's in the pasteurizer. We can do roughly 42 blocks. If we're super fast, we can do 45 in our 50-gallon drum. And it is a 24-hour process. It's heated for the whole 24 hours. It has to be about 208 to 212 degrees. It has to stay at that high temperature that whole time. We do have an exhaust fan in our garage that pulls all the hot air out for us. And it just sits in there for the day. We let it cool. Right now it's only cooling in front of an air purifier, but the overflow hood laminate, that will be part of that process in the future. To just make sure that all the air is as clean as humanly possible, going towards the mushrooms as they're cooling off, well, towards the bags as they're cooling off, so that it is nothing but a clean, pure substrate. If you don't, you'll get things that look like this. This is a very common contaminant, and I'm not going to say for a second that we've never gotten it. It is a type of mold spore that just is prevalent. It's everywhere. We've seen that. We've seen one called lipstick mold. They call it that because it's a bright, pretty pink. We've seen black mold get in there before, and it's just because one little spore got in there, and that is that. However, there's good news. Most of the oysters, especially, will attack that bad boy, and it won't be around for long. They will override most of the contaminants. It is the paraceums that are a little more delicate. They don't seem to do that. Sometimes it's really interesting. They'll cordon off a part of their own bag and they won't go into that part of the bag. They'll leave it just for the mold and they'll only colonize around it. And they'll like give the mold its own little space. It's one of the things that I keep saying is I'm going to have tattooed across my forehead that mushrooms do what they want because you never know. They are so unpredictable and so interesting. It never ceases to amaze me what they will and won't do. But this is before any of the mushroom substrate has been added to it, which comes from those jars from before. So this grain spawn is then used to propagate this bag to get to this. This is a fully colonized bag. All of that white, all the white you're seeing on ours is the mycelium growth inside of the bag. And all of that is happening in a room in our house at room temperature. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me about spores and stuff like that. At that stage, it's not producing spores. It's not looking to sexually reproduce. It's looking to produce its fruiting body so that then it can release its spores. At this stage, there's really not much of a smell. In fact, I think it smells really good. The mycelium has a nice clean scent to it. It doesn't stink. Because there's no mold or anything like that, it doesn't stink. If this happens, dear Lord, it smells like nobody's business. You can really tell a healthy from a not healthy one, a lot of it just by scent. Even if you can't necessarily see it, if it doesn't smell good, it is no good. And then from there we get, and that incubation, sorry, I did want to point that out. We do have shiitake. I know I didn't mention that one to start, and it's because we really moved away from shiitake. Shiitake does not seem to really like the way that we're doing things. We've grown it a couple of times. It takes up to 3 months to go from the bag being inoculated with that grain spawn to being a fully colonized block. And then once we get it into our grow rooms, it produces 4 or 5 mushrooms, and then it just sits there. And it doesn't do anything else. It doesn't give us a second flush. It's a lot for very little return. That is one of them that I really recommend if shiitake is like, oh my God, it's my favorite. That's a log one. That is one that I would say buy some already inoculated logs that you know are good to go. Doing it this way is just not cost effective and not space effective. The freckled chestnuts is another one that we've really struggled with. It's one of our favorites. They're delicious. They're amazing. They're great for gut health. And when they go, they're beautiful and they're big and they're just fantastic. But they give us more trouble than any of our other mushrooms. They just don't seem to want to cooperate in the same way. They'll die off and not do anything. And then all of a sudden we've got 10 blocks all covered in freckled chestnuts. Like, hey, this is more than anybody can do anything with. And so those are our 2 most frustrating ones. Everybody else is usually in the 10 to 21 days. And it depends really on temperature. These colder days that we've had have really slowed down even our oysters. So they're pushing more of like 14 days before they're ready to be fruited. Whereas, and same with our lion's mane and our bear's head, they are also going a little bit further before they're ready to be fruited. It doesn't have to be quite this colonized in order to be fruited, but this is going to get you your fruiting body faster than a less colonized block, if that makes sense. And also the less colonized it is, the more likely it is to do what it wants and come in the wrong spot. And I have a picture of something that happened to somebody who bought one of our blocks here shortly.
How much of the inoculation do you have to put in each one of those bags?
No, great question. So this court, when we first started, we were doing 2 bags. We were doing half and half. That is how we first started because we thought that we needed that much in order to get a fully colonized bag that fast. And then experimentation. One of the problems that we have when we use the glass jars is because those also have to be pasteurized. The grain also has to be pasteurized, and we do it in a pressure canner. Okay, I'm an Uber canner. You should see my basement; it's ridiculous. But anyways, we just do a pressure canner at 15 psi for 90 minutes. Well, when you do that, it sometimes breaks the jars because that's very high pressure for a very long period of time. So occasionally we'll have a jar lost, especially when I was using my grandmother's old jars that have been reused too many times. Now that we've switched to using more newer jars, and now that Kerr has fixed their problems, because Kerr manufacturing had some issues too during COVID, they are lasting much longer. We're not having that issue, but we lost a couple of jars that we couldn't use. So then we were behind. So my husband's like, well, maybe we can split it a little more. So we tried 3 out of a jar, and that worked great. And then we went to 4. And that's what we've been consistently doing now, is about four bags out of a jar.
Like half a cup.
Yes, but you don't want to measure it because you don't want to touch it with anything.
Right.
You just got to shake it out of Yes, I know, it's crazy. Believe me, it took forever for me to get used to the idea that, wait, no, we need to, no, we can't touch it if we use, because we're just literally like holding our breath, opening the jar, pulling it back up and getting the next bag and doing it again. Because that's just one more place along that you can, add something that you don't want to add. So the less you do, the better, which everything with mushrooms is very counterintuitive. At least that's what I've found. So no, excellent question. Thank you. And it really does depend too. The oysters, you can use less than when it comes to the Harrisians. They like to have a little bit more of the grain if they can. The oysters are the way easier ones, honestly. They're much more forgiving. They're much more adaptable. Whereas the rest of them, not so much. So here is our freckled chestnuts that I was talking about. And if you look in the background, you see that there's a bunch of them. This was one of those times they weren't behaving. And then all of a sudden, hi, we're here. But you can see when they do fruit, they're beautiful and they are absolutely delicious. This is a lion's mane that took 22 days. If you do, I'm not trying to promote myself terribly much, but if you do go to our Facebook page, I believe we still have a time lapse of our blue oyster and a time lapse of our lion's mane. The lion's mane, something happened when we were doing the lion's mane. We lost power in our neighborhood. And so I don't know for certain if the lion's mane did, but this is a picture of our inside of our room. You can see that they're just on regular racks, nothing super special. Again, and the whole reason I mentioned the marijuana before, these mylar tents, that was a common thing that, home growers were using for marijuana. That's what we use for our mushroom growing. They're sealed, they're easy to clean, they have a million zippers and allow you to open it and get to different spots. We're just using string lights. They do have to have 12 hours light and 12 hours of dark, but they don't need UV lights. They just need light to coax them out of the bag. We've also grown these on our kitchen counter. They don't mind sunlight. It just causes a little bit of browning. Think like when you take a bite of an apple and it oxidizes. That's kind of what's happening. But yeah, their needs are basic, but their needs are great. Once they're in these rooms for fruiting, we're just cutting open the bag. We just do a small X either in the front or sometimes we do it off on the side. It just depends on our spacing. you get more space like this, but you're gonna get a smaller fruiting body. You get less space like this, but you get a larger fruiting body. So it's all in what you need at the time. You can rip the whole bag off and just let it go bananas, but then you are going to have all kinds of weirdness going on, which is kind of what happened here. So this was one of our customers who bought one of our grow kits. This is actually, believe it or not, a blue oyster. It looks terrible, right? What happened was she misread our directions and she had covered it completely with the towel. She didn't leave open the spot where she had opened the kit to allow the fruiting body to come out. She just covered the whole thing with the towel. And so she was essentially suffocating it. And you're probably thinking, why in the world would you show us a mistake? Well, because this is what happens when they don't get enough airflow. This is what happens when they don't get enough oxygen. Even though you're giving them everything else, things like this happen all the time. We had issues with our inlet fans collecting too many spores. And so they were getting all gummed up and we were starting to see similar structures like this. It is literally the mushroom suffocating. That's how they're showing you that this is not enough for me. They're still edible. You can eat that. It doesn't look appealing, but you can eat that. It's still a mushroom. And what she managed to do is she managed to take off that fruiting body and get a second flush. It was beautiful, no problem. Once she was, knew, oh, don't cover the whole thing with the towel. So, and that's as much as mushrooms do what they want, they are also very forgiving. You can make mistakes. Just go easy on yourself is the main thing I would say. Growing mushrooms, there's so many things that can go wrong, but there are also so many things that can go right. And it is absolutely amazing what you get when it does go right. We've had up to 2 pounds of oysters come off of a single block. And when you're talking about the viability and the use of what you got here, this is a 5-pound block. And I'm telling you, in the first fruiting body, I got 2 pounds worth of food. I mean, that's amazing. And then to get another flush off of that, we've gotten 100%. What the weight of the block, we've gotten 100% of mushroom before. So, and then you still have the block. I'll get to what you can do with that in a minute. But the lion's mane definitely takes the longest once it's opened and fruiting. But also once it's in this state, there's also a chance of contamination again. We never handle our mushrooms once they are in the fruiting room. Once they're in the fruiting chamber, we leave them be until it is time to pick them. We have had them fall off of the fruiting block before because we're like, oh, maybe if we just rearrange it and put it here so that we have more space, and you bump it, it falls off. We've had problems with, they're called fungus gnats, and our rooms are sealed. There's no way to get in and out of them, but they still will find a way, just like fruit flies will find a way into your house. We use fly strip. We do make sure that we have something like that to collect any of those flying insects. There's also oyster beetles that I don't know how in the world these buggers get anywhere inside my house, but they will find a way. In fact, when we're wild foraging, we often will look for these oyster beetles because we'll find them before we find the oyster mushrooms, because they are very prolific and prevalent, and they are looking for oysters like nobody's business. It's how they create their life cycle, is through the oyster mushrooms. So they're obsessed. And the other problem that can come is, especially with the lion's mane, is types of bruising. The oils in your skin, once you touch a lion's mane fruiting body, are going to leave like a bluish bruise on the fruiting body itself. I've had people tell me, oh, it's mold. It's not mold. It's a type of bruise. All mushrooms will bruise to a certain extent. But just like an apple, it's not going to hurt you to eat the bruised part. It's not a problem as long as it's eaten quickly. You know what I mean? So we always wear gloved hands. Like I said, spray down with alcohol to reduce any of those issues. We don't you'll see sometimes commercial growers cutting their mushrooms off of the blocks. We have found that that does not work for us. It introduces mold, and it introduces all kinds of other issues. We do much better just taking the entire fruiting body off and removing some of the substrate from the block, creating a scab. The mushroom will then, heal over that scab and produce a new fruiting body out of the same hole. So we're not again, it's that whole idea of that's just one more instrument that you're introducing that you don't necessarily need to. So we've just found it's just easier for us to take the whole fruiting body off, allow the block to rest, and then there's a very good chance we'll get a second flush off of it. And that's usually what we do at our rooms, is go for 2 flushes. Most commercial growers are only going for 1, but again, we're very small. We don't have the capacity to do that many blocks that fast. So that's why we allow for 2 flushes. Any other questions on this one? We do stack them too high. So it's a row, and then a row in the middle holding them down is how we do it. So each level has 3 stacks of blocks on it. We've just found that works better for spacing and for keeping them weighted down, because they will jump off the top rope, as we like to say. They get heavy on their fruiting side and and then they go into my room. Picking. Here's my lovely daughter. So when we pick our mushrooms, like I said, we're taking the whole fruiting body off. We do like to take them outside for a short period of time after we pick them. And I'm sorry, my pictures wouldn't upload. I had more pictures I wanted you to have, but they just weren't being cooperative. Because mushrooms, like us, make their own vitamin D. When you expose mushrooms to sunlight, they create vitamin D, even after they've been picked. Even your store-bought mushrooms will create vitamin D by exposing them to the sunlight. But you don't want to do it for a long, long period of time. We take them outside and hang out, get a little suntan, we say, get our mushrooms a little suntan, and then they get closed up and they go in the fridge. We also cut the substrate off of them when we put them away, because we found that they just seem to hold a lot longer that way. If they're removed from their substrate, they don't continue to try to grow. They also are less likely to release spores at that point. But yeah. So the picking is a family affair. We all get into the picking, and putting them outside also gives us a chance to really look at them more closely in some natural light. Usually we might find like some piece of substrate or something like that. It's just a nice way to find defects. This type of lighting, just, the shadows cast and whatnot. We don't always see everything. Storage. When you get mushrooms from us, they come in this cute little box with all these holes in it, and the box is compostable. It is made of cardboard. It is fine for keeping them in the fridge for 3 to 5 days, maybe even a week. But they are going to dry out because it's full air exposure. The mushrooms you buy in the grocery store are covered in plastic, which just kills my little heart, because mushrooms are trying to breathe. They're literally suffocating in there. So any store-bought mushrooms that you get covered in plastic, please, as soon as you get home, get that plastic off of them as fast as possible, because they are not getting their air exchange that they need, and it's just it's making them die faster. It's making them ruin faster, no matter what you do. The way we keep our mushrooms is we actually have made these shoebox totes. These are available at Walmart. I think you get 10 of them for $10.47. And what we've done is then just drilled holes all along them in 2 rows so that they can breathe, so that they can get an air exchange in the fridge. And then we do keep the lid on them. They have their lid on them. We check them every day to see if there's condensation. We wipe off the condensation at the top of the lid, and then we close them back up again. We don't mess with them too much until we're ready to go to market. And I don't sell them after 4 days. That's the end of their life in my world, because I used to be a chef a million years ago. 4 days, you chuck it. You keep things after 4 days. There's too many chances of other things getting into them. So after 4 days, they either go into our food supply, or then there's other storages. And I'll talk about the other ways that we maintain them, preserve them. But in my house, I have kept them in these bins for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and not seen any degradation. Like it's crazy what, like I said, let them do what they want. This is how when we do our crop shares, this is how we give our crop share people their shares. One, there's not as much waste, so it's not something you're throwing away. We're reusing it a bunch of times. Two, it's like I said, this is by far the best way we have found to store mushrooms, hands down. There's no paper, nothing. There's no paper towel, anything in there. They're coming from my perfectly humidity controlled environment into a fridge, which is also perfectly humidity controlled. So there's not a terrible amount of condensation. The other thing with these is they're stackable. So when they're in the fridge, we have a lot of room to be able to put as much as we want in there. And the only downside is that we do typically have to break the mushrooms down more than we would like to. We do have to pull them apart because some of these fruiting bodies, I'm not kidding, think basketball size. So when we have to break them down, they don't quite fit into that size, but we found that for the most part, this is a great size for them. Another thing that happens a lot is a little bit of breakage on our mushrooms, just splitting just from them. They are delicate, they really are, but our customers don't seem to mind. They haven't really complained about it or anything, so it's worked out really well for us. And this has been our #1 way of storing our mushrooms. Before this, we used paper bags, and I would get a week, maybe a week and a half, putting them just in a big old paper bag, maybe put a paper towel in there, and it was fine. It was not a problem, but this has been far superior. Trying to think, there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, we also number them, so then we can date them and know when they went in. Like I said, 4 days is our rule before they have to go into a different system. Usually our own food system. I'm not kidding when I say mushrooms for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We eat them a lot, and we're not vegetarian or vegan, so it's not like it's a supplement. It is a side dish, or it is the main dish with some more meat in it. So preserving. This is our main way of preserving them. Dehydrator. We have a digital dehydrator, and I'm sorry, I realized I cut off the numbers. It should say 135. That's our magic number. That's the number that we like the best. It seems to hold on to the flavor and the nutritional value and everything the best. And we seem to get the least amount of degradation as far as changing color and whatnot. And you'll see in here, there's turkey tail, bear's head's tooth, lion's mane, our blue oysters, and some of our the summer oysters, those ones right there in there. We put them all together because, again, for the most part, we're picking our mushrooms before they get to their spore stage. So they're a little bit on the immature side, but nothing crazy. And I don't have any issues with any of the other mushrooms. So we do mix and match when we dehydrate. It's not been a problem. When we first started doing it, we definitely were keeping them all separate. But as we've done it over time, we just realized that it really doesn't make that much of a difference. Another thing I really like to do with them is make like a stir fry, pre-made stir fry. This is actually one that was going right into my freezer on a tray. Just mixed all my veggies right there on the tray, put parchment paper down and put them in my chest freezer and let them freeze like that. And then put them into, I have gallon bags, reusable bags, and put them in there. And then I've got my stir fry ready to go. And that is, I found that with all of my mushrooms. I haven't had any problem with freezing any of them. And then my favorite way, chicken of the woods. This is my favorite way to preserve chicken of the woods. So I marinate it in buttermilk with some spices. And then I dip it in flour, just like you would treat a fried chicken. And then I put it on trays and freeze them individually. And then I put them in those bags, and then I pull them out and throw them in some, deep fry them. I really like lard personally. And fry them up until they're, golden crispy. And I have literally had people tell me, this isn't chicken? Really? Are you sure this isn't chicken? No, for real. It's chicken of the woods. I see a lot of like blogs and even Forager Chef, Forager Chef is my guy. I go to him whenever I have a mushroom and I want to know how to cook it. He even recommends dehydrating chicken of the woods. Don't ever dehydrate chicken of the woods. I beg you. It turns into styrofoam and it's awful and it does not come back from that state. When we first started mushroom hunting, that very first year, my husband came across 120-pound specimen of chicken of the woods. It was gorgeous. And this was in our days where we really didn't know what we were doing. And he just took it all and brought it all home. And I'm like, what am I going to do with mushrooms that weigh like almost as much as I do? All right, let's figure this out. And so I was trying everything. Like I said, Forager Chef's my guy. He said to dehydrate it. He said to pickle it. He said to do all these things. So I'm doing all of those things. And then I was like, well, if it's chicken, why can't I treat it like chicken? And I came up with this. It's not a recipe that I had found anywhere else. I came up with it. And I just was like, nope, all right, we'll do that. And I fried it up for us and we loved it. Like, okay, well, I'll just do a bunch more of that because I do, like I said, I like to preserve and I like to have all my canned goods. And so I did a bunch of them, and that has just hands down become our favorite way. We actually like it better after it's frozen. We don't even do it fresh anymore. I do a huge batch of it, and then I freeze it, and then when I want it, I pull some out. My husband and my daughter toss it in wing sauce, some Red Hot and some butter, and they love it like that. I like it with barbecue personally, but we've used it like a chicken for chicken barbecue sandwiches and stuff like that too, and it's been delicious. Everybody else dehydrates very nicely. I cannot say that like all the rest of the mushrooms don't play well dehydrated. They really do. They all come back decently from it. Another thing I really like to do with the dehydrated mushrooms is grind them. Like I said before, I have celiac disease, so I can't have traditional flours. And one of the main problems with gluten-free baking is that it's missing that protein, that extra protein, because that's what gluten is. And so the mushrooms provide that. I found that it's much more elastic. I found that my noodles have more chew. I found that my pizza crust is very close to a regular pizza crust now. And so I do use a lot of powdered mushroom in my savory baking. And then I also use it as a seasoning and as a gravy powder. Mushroom gravy powder is amazing. Yeah. So freezing is though typically the easiest way, the fastest way. Yes, ma'am.
Well, how long do you dehydrate?
It depends on the thickness of the mushroom. So the turkey tail does not take very long at all because it's very thin. The bear's head tooth, that is usually around 6 to 8 hours at that 135. The lion's mane, again, 6 to 8 hours. The oysters, they're like, again, just do what they want to do. The golden oysters, 4 hours. The blue oysters and the summer oysters, those sometimes it can go all the way for 12 hours before they're fully dehydrated. What you're looking for is cracker crunch. If you can break it and it has that snap to it, that's when you know you've got it dehydrated enough to be able to just put it in a jar, seal it, put it on the shelf, use it when you want it. I do have a friend who, she's crazy. She also puts it in the jar and then she freezes it. I'm like, okay, I don't have the freezer space for that. So mine are dehydrated in jars in my witch's cabinet, as my husband likes to call it. Because I have a cabinet full of all of our wild mushrooms and our dehydrated mushrooms and my herbs and stuff like that that I've picked. Because it's not just mushrooms we look for, it's also different plants and whatnot too. But yes, so it's all different on different times. I just did puffball, and puffball, it took 8 hours. Yes.
Do you vacuum seal the jars once you put the mushrooms in them?
Nope. Nope. And I've never had any problem. I have actually some morels that I have had now for 3 years. And I have no problems, no mold, no nothing. As long as you get them to that state where they're cracker dry, I've not had any issues. And I open them and use some of it, and seal it back up and throw it back in the jar, and I've not had any problems. When I tried using a bag, like just a regular plastic bag, That I did not have as good luck. That did have issues where once I opened it, it sucked that moisture back in, and I ended up having to re-dehydrate a bunch of stuff, and that was annoying. But as long as it was kept in a mason jar with just a traditional lid, nothing crazy, nothing special, I've had no problems, and I've been doing that for 14 years now. Yeah, I've never had any of my mushrooms that are in a glass jar go bad. Anything I've tried to put in plastic, on the other hand, I've had issues with. I also like to can them. The USDA and Ball and all of them will say, don't can wild mushrooms. The reason they're telling you not to can wild mushrooms is because if you don't know what you got, you just mix something in there that could be dangerous. And I agree with them as far as that goes. But if you follow the same recipe, which is what I've done that they have for regular button mushrooms, I have found that all of them can very nicely. You get a very similar texture to any traditional canned mushroom. I really like to throw a little bit of thyme or rosemary in with them when I'm canning them, just because then you get that other savoriness to it. And then they're great to just throw into soups or whatnot. In a dehydrated state, I'll just crumble them like this and throw them in my soup, good to go. I've done any number of things. I just find that if you're wanting them closest to fresh, freezing them like this is the best way. They tend to still get a little bit crisp to them. They tend to not be quite as floppy and whatnot. But if you're dehydrating them, which is what I do when I have much more than I need, and same with canning them. I've pickled them too. Forager Chef's got some really great pickled recipes, especially for the oysters. That one's dead on. So yeah, but the lion's mane and the hericium, those ones I really like to dehydrate because they're also nice to add to a tea because they do have those healing properties. So those are in my heal all. I make a tea that for my family, the feel better heal all tea, that anytime anybody's not feeling good, Mom, can you make me tea with honey? Yes. So those get put in there too. But that's the only one I use like that. I don't use the oyster mushrooms like that, although they do have different healing properties, and there's all kinds of research out there.
So
Yes.
when you put the little slide, the mushrooms in there are dehydrated?
Nope. They're just, so it's the
Just fresh mushrooms.
fresh mushrooms that I pulled apart and I threw in with my other veggies.
So everything is just raw.
Yep.
And then you just lay it out so
Yep.
it freezes quick, and then you take it and
Bag her up. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's my one of my favorite ways of doing it. We've got different stir fry, a fajita mix. I like to do a chicken of the woods fajita mix. And I do an omelet mix too, so that then it's just ready to grab, throw it in the pan, move on with life. Just a nice, easy way of storing them. And they are all labeled like that in the freezer. All right, a little bit about the life cycle, and I can move this, right? Okay, so the wild life cycle, and this was what I was hinting at before, that we're picking them in this stage. We're picking them before they get to their full-on sporing stage. Now, has it happened that we were late? Yep, because mushrooms do what they want. You can think they're going to be good for the morning, and you'll wake up and you'll see there's spores everywhere. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this was 8 hours. How did you do this in 8 hours? But they will do what they want, and there is no stopping them from getting it. But once they've released their spores, then there's that chance of sexual reproduction. And that is part of why we grow them in the room and why we keep the room so clean, is to avoid that from happening. We also don't have any of our mushroom rooms exposed to our cement. So because those spores, they will go into that cement. We actually repainted our entire basement with kilns and did multiple layers so that then we were preventing those spores from getting into that cement, because they'll eat it. They will. That's their substrate. It doesn't matter. They will get into it. This is the phase that we are avoiding, this hyphenase phase. This is when they are reproducing in a sexual manner. That is the phase that we're leaving out of it by cloning them. So we're taking them actually from this phase and kind of keeping them in that phase. They do colonize the substrate. We're going like back and forth between these two phases with the way we're growing them. Now, if you were to grow them on logs, like I said, the shiitake, you're going to see this whole phase go through. And you will find shiitakes and other mushrooms growing in other places when you grow them and allow them to spore. It will happen. But mushrooms also do whatever they want. So stopping them from doing any of this is next to impossible. We have not had any contamination. We have not had any of our mushrooms go other places in our lawn that we didn't put them. Now, that's not to say that that hasn't happened somewhere else far, far away that we don't know about, but we have not had that issue. There are a lot of commercial growers who get really upset about this guy right here. The golden oyster is not native to North America. It's actually native to South America. It prefers a very warm climate. We have not had any problems, and it doesn't seem to like Western New York. We don't see it in the wild. We don't see it when we go foraging. It's not an issue. My aunt lives in Albany. She harvested 70 pounds of golden oysters last year in the wild, not off of anything I gave her. In fact, she's never done any of my grow kits. My grandmother has, but my aunt never has. She harvested 70 pounds of golden oysters off of dead ash. And it is a bit of an issue on the further east way. So I understand, but at the same time, it just doesn't seem to make it through our winters. It doesn't seem to like it. We're careful, but there's no, and the only way that they think that it got there was by commercial growers and some spores getting out. So that's what I mean by we're trying to live between these two, but mushrooms do what they want. And if they come out, if they do spore, then there's a chance that they could propagate themselves in areas in ways that you do not want. So that is another, just know that that is something that happens. And as far as I know, it's only really been an issue with this golden oyster. And I'm not saying it is even this exact one, but it is a golden oyster that got out and is now pretty prolific out east. You find it on a lot of dead trees and dead logs out that way. And there are some mycologists who are concerned that it is taking away from the biodiversity of the other mushrooms. There's not been enough research to say so about it because it's only been noticed in the last 5 to 10 years that there's even any golden oysters running around. So it's fairly new. It's something that is being watched carefully, and we honestly considered not growing them for that reason. But after we did more research and we found that they weren't here, they weren't able to colonize in this area, we kind of were like, well, let's see how they do with us. And we still have not seen any indication that they've gone anywhere or done anything. They just don't seem to make it out this way. Anything west of Syracuse, they don't come. And even Syracuse, they don't see them. It's out that way, Hudson Valley. So that's another reason we try to keep them from getting to the spore state. Any questions on that? Oh, I forgot. I took out the compost one because that was the picture I couldn't get. So the fun thing is that even after it has given you all it's given, it hasn't. There's more. You take it out of this plastic bag, and this right here is some of the world's best compost. It is amazing. I cannot believe what has happened in my garden in just the last 2 years. I am a no-till, nothing. I don't mess with my gardens at all. I put compost on them, and I put leaves in with it. I do mulch. And that is it. And I don't even mulch every year. I mulch every other year. And I grow blueberries. I grow raspberries. I have different herbs. I have flower gardens. The whole 9 yards. It's everywhere. Before we found somebody to take our spent blocks for us, because they do go to a local farm, Lantern's Hollow. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they have taken on composting our blocks because we're producing about 100 blocks every other week. So that's why it's gotten to be too much for my small little house. I only live on a quarter of an acre. I live right in the town of Faulkner. I do not have space. My yard is all gardens. That's all it is. My husband takes 5 minutes to mow the lawn because that's all the grass there is in my lawn. Everything else is something to feed me or feed somebody else. But everything has grown exponentially larger. I watered once this summer. It held the water so beautifully. And it was mostly was the compost. Sure, it was some of my traditional compost that I would normally use, but the vast majority of it was our spent blocks. I watered once. My berries had never been sweeter. My herbs were outrageously big to the point where I was literally giving them away at the farmer's market. Like, please take my oregano. I don't need this much oregano. I have so much. I also used it in some of my house plants, and like my spider plants turned around and got much better. I grow an indoor rosemary. It is beautiful and big, whereas I had just about killed it before. So I am shocked and amazed at what it is doing as far as the compost in my yard. And I have gotten mushrooms out from around some of my places where I know I put blocks, particularly the blue oyster. That one, I had a little clump of blue oyster that every single time it rained, it would give me a new fruiting body of blue oyster out of that one particular spot. It did also invite some other mushrooms though too. I had slime molds that I had never had before, which the one that's probably the most common is the scrambled egg slime mold, and it looks just like it says. And then I had some stinkhorns, which those are not nice. Technically they're edible, but this one I'm not going to try. It smells like death and it looks awful, and it's terrible. But for the first time ever this year, I had some in my yard, and I've never had them before. I've also had, what was the other one? I had lots of agrocypes, which are just little tiny guys that and parasols are just the little tiny, what you think of as regular woodland mushrooms type of deal. And then the not having to water, everything was bigger and sweeter. I just couldn't believe it. And my friend at Lanterns Hollow, has been taking all of our blocks. She just finished this year's compost, and she's putting it to bed for the winter, and we'll be spreading it in the spring in her gardens for the first time. So we'll see how it goes on a larger scale. But yeah, it's just amazing because all it really mostly is wood, and it's just wood that's been broken down even further. So it's the same as putting on your wood chips. It's just already broken down, and it made such beautiful black soil. It was so dark and rich. Because there was, one part of my yard that my husband and I kept throwing the spent blocks as we were playing with them and figuring stuff out, and that was what got spread in my garden, was that one from 2 years ago. So yeah, I'm really impressed with what they do as far as that goes. And as long as they weren't completely exhausted when you did that, there is a chance that you could even get some mushrooms outside too. But they seem to stay there. Like that blue oyster, it hasn't come back in the last 2 months. It's been done. It's said, I've given all I can give. I'm out. And I really haven't seen too much of other places. A little bit of golden oyster for, I think, like the first time it rained in the spring, there was a golden oyster that showed up, and then it didn't do anymore. And I have not seen any of my hericiums. None of my lion's mane, none of my bears said they didn't do that. Once I broke up those blocks, they didn't come back. If I leave the whole block, they do come back. If I take that off and I just set it down on the ground, I can get more out of that block that I already said was done. It'll keep producing more. If I leave it just sitting on the ground, nothing else. I don't have to do anything more to it. Let the rain take care of it, and I get lots more out of it, but that's all for me. I do sell wild mushrooms. I am certified as a wild forager for 30 different kinds of mushrooms in 8 different states. And we do sell them, but always with the caveat that, hey, if this lived outside, there might be a bug still left in it. We don't wash them. Just be careful, please. So yeah, we do also encourage our people not to wash our mushrooms, because they did not live anywhere but a humid environment. We do about 80% humidity, and we try to keep it as close to 70 degrees as possible in our rooms. There was something else I wanted to say, and I just switched to this one on purpose, and now I've forgotten what it was. But yeah, we don't, tell people not to wash them because there's nothing on them. They weren't touched by human hands until you picked them up and eaten them. And if you try to wash them, they're just going to absorb the water. In fact, these little guys here, the oysters, I like to deep fry them, especially the golden oysters. I really like to deep fry them like a beer batter type thing with a fish fry. I made the mistake of leaving them in the batter and going to the bathroom and coming back to do it. And they had absorbed all of the water out of it. And there was nothing, there's no water left in it. It was just powder. I was like, you little monsters, I cannot believe it. And so I had to I couldn't use it because it was so heavy and dense with the water and it had absorbed. I couldn't fry it. It was gonna, pop all over me. So yeah, that was the end of that. So yeah, there is that thing that they will truly absorb way more than you think they will in water. There's actually a lot of research being done right now about growing all these same types of mushrooms underwater. And what that can do for them. It's pretty interesting. I was actually reading some articles while I was trying to put this together about that. But that's something they're trying as a different way of growing them so that then you don't even have substrate waste. You would literally take them from the liquid culture state and grow them inside of a jar from the liquid culture and allow them to create a fruiting body like this. So then you don't have this black substrate as waste. So, and technically, this is edible too. Really want to. All those mushroom powders, all those coffee rise things. That's what they're giving you. Unless it specifically says fruiting body, it's the mycelium. Because it's the same thing. It has the same properties, it gives you the same nutritional value. The only difference is you're mixing it with some straw or some sawdust or something. So that's another soapbox for another day. My husband always gets mad at me. Don't be talking bad about other people's stuff. It's like, well, I hate to not tell people that that's what it is. Any questions? I mean, I know I still have a little bit more time. I thought I'd have more questions.
Raspberries.
Yes.
With this.
Yes. Yep. I mulched my red raspberries and my blackberries with it. And I could not believe it. I got the most raspberries I've ever gotten out of my raspberries this year. My mother bought me ever-bearing raspberries. So they don't always produce large amounts at any given time. And I got the most and the sweetest berries I've ever gotten out of them. And I've had those bushes for, my kid's 14, so 12 years. And then the blackberries are always prolific in my yard, and they were just so sweet. They weren't that little bitterness or anything like that. And the only thing I did different was mulch them with a mushroom substrate. I didn't do anything else different. And I didn't water them. I mean, it was just amazing. And I do permaculture. Like, I don't till up my soil. The only time I dig in my dirt is to put a new plant in. Otherwise, I leave it. Because, like I said, with all of this research, I really have learned a lot more about the whole mycorrhizal benefits. And I'm only talking about saprophytic mushrooms here today, but we also do grow a mycorrhizal mushroom called wine caps. And that was new to us this year. I actually at Jamestown Public Market sold my first quart of them this Saturday. We've been keeping them to ourselves because we do grow them outside, and the squirrels have gotten to a few of them, and the slugs really enjoy them. So I try not to do too much of that, but so mycorrhizal mushrooms are a whole other thing where you have to have the plant and relationship with the mushroom because they're feeding each other. Mushrooms are great for carbon sequestration. They really do take in that carbon and make sure it goes back into the soil. But the mycorrhizal on top of the carbon sequestration, they're also pulling the nitrogen and the phosphorus from the plants and creating a symbiotic relationship where they're giving to each other. There's even some research being done now about the communication factors of what mushrooms are able to communicate to other mushrooms, what they're communicating with the other plants. It's wild what's being done right now in the mycology world. And the largest living thing on our planet is actually a mushroom. It's a honey mushroom species. It's out west. It lives with the second largest species on our planet, and it's the aspen. There's an aspen that has cloned itself, and in amongst that is the largest honey mushroom. So it's crazy and that one covers like 4 or 5 states, something like that. That honey mushroom, the same mycelial structure, pushes out that far. But puffballs, for instance, bury themselves deep down under the ground. Their mycelial structure is like 10 to 20 feet underground, and it sends up this one little thread-like structure to come up to the surface. And once it comes up to the surface, you get that big puffball. But the mycelium is way down there, so I can't grow puffballs. I can't grow, like I was saying before about the chicken of the woods. That thing had to have been in a tree that was living. The tree had to die. Like, I can't replicate that. And that's why when they say that you can grow them, I'm like, okay, if you really think so. But I don't know of anybody who's ever been successful, and I don't really foresee myself even trying, because it just doesn't seem feasible. The people that I know who have maybe gotten like 1 or 2 little shelves, it took them years to get that. And it just doesn't, commercially, that's not viable to say at all. Same with morels. I see a lot of advertisements about growing morels. They're mycorrhizal. They have to have certain plants and trees and everything else with them in order to be really the same type of mushroom. The only people who commercially grow morels are in Asia. They do grow them commercially, but they're growing them on a substrate that I won't eat from, and it's not the same. If you try morels from the store, they do not taste anything like a wild morel. It is completely different. And that's true of even our mushrooms. Honestly, the way that they taste in the wild is completely different than the way that they taste even grown ourselves. I love wild oysters. Love them. They're one of my favorites, but they are, like I said, those oyster beetles, that's their whole life cycle. You are going to eat oyster beetle larvae. If you eat wild oysters, there's no way of getting around it. It will happen. So if you're not okay with that, then you need to go with commercially grown. Because my good friend is vegan, and she's like, well, I can't do that. I can't eat the larva. That's against everything I believe in. And I was like, well, then commercial it is. That's all you got. And I can guarantee you there's no larva in this. But the wild ones, nope, cannot. And I have eaten them. I know I have. So, and it's what it is. Chanterelles are like that too. Chanterelles are mycorrhizal. They can only grow amongst other plants. And so that I can't grow a chanterelle. It has to grow out in nature, and I have to go out and find it. So yeah, there's certain ones that just don't work like that. They're not saprophytic. It has to be saprophytic to grow in this type of condition and to grow quickly. So yeah. But I'm happy to answer any other questions. Like I said, I could talk about mushrooms all day. I haven't even dumped all my knowledge on y'all. So
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How do you know when like your block is spent? Because you said you bring it outside and sometimes they grow. How come you can't just keep that and keep injecting it?
So you don't want to keep injecting it because the food source is what is really spent. It's not not necessarily the mycelium or the mushroom that's spent. It's just like like I was talking about with viability. This if you want to feel, it's the best way I can show you. If you pick this block up, it is so much lighter than this box because this box has never been fruited and this bag has been fruited twice. So it's lighter and you can actually feel how it's lighter because it's been used. It's used some of that food, that substrate has been used up to produce that mushroom. So every single time it fruits, the fruit gets smaller and the block gets lighter. I only do twice because after twice, the chances of getting a contamination are outrageously bigger. Even most commercial growers only grow once and then they chuck it. They're done. They're not even going to try to get it for a second time. The only reason we go for two is because we're so small. And if we had something go wrong, we could notice it and see it right away. The big commercial growers that have rooms like this that are full of one kind of mushroom, they can't afford to do that. If they have a little bit of mold, think about it. That's tens of thousands of dollars out the window. Whereas I'm like, oh, okay. There's one $20 bill. Oops. It's not as big of a deal for us to be doing something like that. But yeah, so you just will see them get progressively smaller. Like a lot of these pictures are first flushes. They're not the second flush. This is a second flush. The first flush on this was like this. It's bigger than the size of the block. And then the second flush is smaller. And then it almost exponentially gets smaller by half every time. It goes from around 15 to 18 ounces on most of our oysters are their first flush. Their second flush is around 9 to 7. And then it drops down to like 3. And then the oysters are done really usually after 3. That same vegan friend, she grew a bear's head. She was actually our experiment. She grew the bear's head. Got a nice big beautiful one. She was all excited. Got another one, all excited. Got a third one. She was like, "Oh, it's tiny, but I still can eat it." And then she was like, "Well, can I try for a fourth one?" I'm like, "Go ahead." She did. She got this tiny little thing. It wasn't, nothing. She didn't even eat it because it ended up drying out before because she let it go too long. So then she's like, "I think it's done, Emilie. I'm gonna go put it in the garage." I was like, "Yep." It was like February by this point. And I was like, "Yep, go put it in the garage. Save it for when you just break it up and put it on your blueberries in the spring." And she calls me up. She's like, "You'll never believe this. There's a fifth one on there. And it's beautiful." So I mean, mushrooms do what they want. I don't know what to say. So like this, what I was talking about before about being able to just grow them on your table. This is what I mean by that. You just take a bowl, you put water in that bowl, you take another one and turn it upside down so it acts as a pedestal. And then the towel drapes over to create that extra humidity and it just wicks up the moisture. We do give a spray bottle because until the actual mushroom comes out, you do want to spray it just to keep encouraging it. Like, this is where you need to go, little buddy, like that kind of thing. And then once you rip that substrate, the whole mushroom and that substrate out, you spray that again to try to get it to focus back in on that spot. Actually, one of my friends is growing one in her classroom right now, and we took off the first one, and she's on her second one now, trying to get a second flush out of it in the classroom. So, but yeah, that's how we recommend just growing them on your counters, just like that. And so for Valentine's Day, like I said, the golden oyster is honestly one of my favorites. I love it deep fried. For Valentine's Day, my husband and I always like have a big meal. Like it's nothing romantic. We don't go out. We buy all the stuff that we want, all the expensive cheeses and a nice bottle of wine and that kind of thing, and gorge ourselves on crazy expensive foods. And I really wanted a golden oyster, so that's what he did. Is he grew me a golden oyster on our counter because it doesn't work in the winter. This sucker does not grow in our grow rooms in the winter. It's actually, they're done. Like we won't be making any more bags of it because it's already slowed down to the point where it's not becoming viable for us anymore. So he made a bag special for me to grow for Valentine's Day and put it in a vase so that it was sitting there. And that was my flowers for Valentine's Day. It was a big golden oyster bouquet in one of my vases. So it's just, in upstairs, it's a lot easier to keep the heat going and not have that cool down. But in the basement, this little bit of fluctuation can make the difference. Blue oysters, for instance, are not blue in the summer. They're gray. They do not have that nice blue color whatsoever in the summertime. As soon as the overnight temperatures start dipping down into the 30s and 40s, then all of a sudden they're this brilliant, like almost the color of your water bottle's blue, just gorgeous. And it's like, why do you look so hideous all summer long? And then in the wintertime, you're gorgeous when you don't have any farmers markets. You know? And they have this gorgeous cream colored flesh on them. So you've got this bright blue cap and this cream colored flesh. They're just so vibrant and different. And then all summer long, they're like this colored gray. And like not even, yep. We have a client or a customer who calls them gray. They're not blue oysters, they're gray oysters. You're lying. They're made in this week. You finally got to see how blue they actually can be. So
when you cook the blue oysters, do they stay that blue? I know a lot of different vegetables, if they're colored, they'll lose their color when you cook them.
They do lose a lot of their color. They become more blue. And actually the pink oysters turn orange. Yeah, the pink oysters turn like a bright orange. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. The rest of them kind of just color up like you would with regular cooking the mylar, the brownish, the same thing. The golden oysters do tend to keep their yellow. They don't seem to fade too much. Trying to think of anybody else that does anything kind of strange. Oh, there's a type of bolete, a wild bolete. It's my favorite one. It's called a bicolor bolete. It's got an orange cap and a yellow stipe. And when you cut it open, it turns blue. But the blue will eventually fade. And when you cook it, the blue doesn't stay either. But it's just kind of cool. It's one of the mushrooms that I always show little kids, like, oh, watch this magic trick. It's blue. That kind of thing. But no, a lot of the color does fade out of the mushrooms once you cook them. And there's a lot of mushrooms that get used for like dyes and stuff like that. I actually have a lady who contacted me right at the end of summer to ask about, she wants to start dyeing her alpaca yarn with natural dyes because she's found she's really struggling with the chemical dyes. So I've been doing a lot of research for her, and I'm going to be looking for certain mushrooms to help her to be able to dye her alpaca yarn so that she's got some other colors, because some of them, well, there's one called Dyer's Polypore that is a brilliant yellow color, and then there's ones that'll do greens, and there's purples, and mushrooms come in every color of the rainbow. They really, really do. And I mean, the color really has nothing to do with the edibility. People get worried about that, and they think that the brighter the color, the more likely it is to be poison. The deadliest mushroom there is pure white. It's called Destroying Angel, and it grows right here. Yep, that one will kill you in 4 days. It'll destroy your insides, slowly destroy all of your organs, and leaving you completely unable to function as a human being. The few people who have survived it had to have transplants, multiple organ transplants. But their comment was that it was one of the most delicious mushrooms they ever had.
I don't think it'd be worth it.
I do my due diligence beyond belief. I've thrown out more edible mushrooms than I've thrown out poisonous ones. I guarantee that. I really try my darndest. I don't want to die, and I don't want my customers to die. So I am very, very careful and very picky about what I do. Like I said, we're only allowed to sell 30 in New York State. And that is because a lot of the other mushrooms, like I said, I've eaten over 100. A lot of the other mushrooms that I've eaten have deadly lookalikes. They have, if you don't know what you're doing, you can make yourself sick. It actually happened to one of our customers. She bought chanterelles from us, and she was so excited. She ate the chanterelles. She's like, I think these grow in my forest. And we told her their chanterelles are good, but there's jack-o'-lanterns, and those ones are not good, and they will make you sick. And they will grow together. Like, be careful, send us pictures, and we'll be able to tell from the picture, because it's one of the ones you can. And she sent us a picture, and we're like, yep, you're good. Those are good. Those are definitely chanterelles. You're fine. She ate those. Everything was great. She found some more and ate them without sending us pictures because she thought she knew what she was doing. And she ate jack-o'-lanterns and did not leave the bathroom for 4 days.
Oh my.
She didn't, you know, it won't kill you, but it'll make you wish you were dead because it's coming out both ends and there's no holding anything in. And most people end up being hospitalized because of dehydration because of them. Because it's both, you can't stop it. And they do look very similar. The only difference is the chanterelle has false gills and a jack-o'-lantern has true gills. And I've literally seen them growing together. I've seen them growing on the same area. The jack-o'-lantern is saprophytic. They do grow on wood. And the chanterelle does not. It grows as a mycorrhizal, but they like the same mycorrhizal relationship with the trees that those jack-o'-lanterns grow on. So that's how they'll end up growing in the same spot next to each other. And people just, you know, you get all excited because they're the same color that you think you're okay, but if you don't know all of the other things to it, then you can end up making yourself pretty darn sick. There's really only 2 of them in this area that will kill you and that you're not going to come back from. Like I said, the destroying angel, I know of 2 different bloggers who have blogged about it that have come back from it, but with multiple organs and you know, lifelong disabilities and unable to go foraging any longer. Like it's not something that you want to live from. And the other one is called funeral bells, or Ganoderma, or not Ganoderma, excuse me. Oh, science names not coming to me, but funeral bells look a lot like our freckled chestnuts. I mean, a lot like them. You can easily be mistaken for them. Velvet foot enoki is the other one that's a lookalike to them. Enoki is something that a lot of people eat in like Asian cooking, the little white ones. But the one that grows around here looks closer to this. And it grows again on the same exact wood, the same exact spot. The only difference is enoki has a white spore print and the funeral bells has a brown spore print. And if you don't know that, you don't know to do that extra layer of work, you can have yourself in a very dangerous situation. And it doesn't take much. No mushrooms are deadly from touching them. They're only deadly from ingesting them. You can touch all of them. I have pictures of me and my dog touching jack-o'-lanterns on purpose to be like, look, this is a toxic mushroom that I know I can't. I know I'll get sick if I eat it, but I can touch it. I don't get sick from touching it. I let my dog sniff it. He didn't get sick from sniffing it. So it's just one of those things. People everybody was told stay away from mushrooms. Don't touch them, don't touch them. It's not the touching them, it's the eating them. That's the only way to actually get that in you. There's none of them, not even psilocybin. You can't get high by touching the wacky ones either. It's only from ingesting them. Yep. That was part of our certifications. We had to be able to differentiate between all of those. We had to know 45 regular, like not toxic mushrooms, and we had to know 25 toxic mushrooms, and we had to know all of their parts, when they grow, where they grow, how they grow, their spores, everything. And we had to be 100% accurate in order to get our certification. If we didn't get 100% on the test, we did not get our certification.
And who does the certification?
Mushroom Mountain is who did it for us. Mushroom Mountain LLC. We had to drive down to Georgia in order to get our certification, in order to get our business in line for June. Because the only one offered in New York State, I think, is going to be offered here shortly in late November. And we didn't want to wait that long. We wanted to be able to offer wilds. And we don't, like I said, we'd already been doing that for 14 years. It wasn't like we were unknowledgeable, but it was a serious test. And it is here's a picture of it. What is it? Where, how can you tell it apart? What's the way? And there was tricks on there too. Meadow mushrooms or pinkies. That's another one that a lot of old timers talk about, picking in fields and stuff like that. It's an agaricus species, which means it's the same as a button mushroom that you get in the grocery store. Looks a lot like it too. You just flip it over and it has pink gills when it's fresh. And they are delicious. They smell great. I've eaten them. But there is a lookalike that'll make you sick. And that lookalike They're identical. Flip it over, pink gills. Growing in grass. Both of them look like a meadow mushroom. The only difference is when you scratch it, it turns yellow. When you smell it, it smells kind of like burning plastic. At least that's what it smells like to me. Whereas a meadow mushroom has the delicious mushroom smell that's positive. So just not too long ago, one of my friends sent me a picture. He's like, "Oh, Emilie, can I eat this one?" And I was like, "Okay, honey, look it. I always tell you, send me a picture. This is one I can't tell you with the picture. Unless I can see it and touch it and smell it, I can't tell you for certain that this is not one that is going to make you sick. So please don't eat it." And that is our answer all the time. We don't mess around. I will gladly tell you I don't know. I will gladly tell you don't. I will gladly tell you that, so, nope, leave it alone. Don't touch it. I have no problem doing that. I'm not somebody who's going to second guess it. Even if I'm 99% sure, I'm still going to tell you no, because that 1% is not worth it, in my opinion. And we have thrown away plenty of mushrooms on that 1%. My husband and I both have, just because we didn't like the way it looked. We didn't like the way it formed. It smells a little bit off. Nope, not worth it. So it's just not, I'm not that hungry.
Now, if you took one of the maybe spent or almost spent blocks and put it in a place where like oyster mushrooms might grow, will they, and you let it flower or
Spore out?
Will it propagate?
It has a chance to.
It has a chance.
It has a chance to. So one of the things that I've heard 80,000 times from a million different people, people who know a lot and people who don't, is that, sorry, let me get back to it, is the chicken of the woods. So I've heard a million times over, the chicken of the woods, take and anything, the water you wash them in or whatever you use to wash them, or maybe if there's little pieces of it you didn't use because it was too woody, swoosh them all up and put them on a log and they'll grow there. Never seen it happen. I've tried it, I don't know how many times. I've also heard that if you cut it off, then it'll grow back. Tried it, never worked for me, not once. So there's a lot of those kind of things that
it has to be the right place at the right time.
Yep,
conditions have to be
perfect.
Yeah,
they do what they want. I'm not kidding when I say that. That is they do what they want, and there is no talking them into anything. It is not the same as flowers. It is not the same where you put the seed in and you'll at least get one. If you put 100 seeds in, you'll get one. No, it's not how it works.
It has to be in the right environment.
Yep.
And it's the same way with my girlfriend worked for the National Forest Service, so we would go out searching for wild orchids, rare wild orchids, and you have to know exactly what trees are around them, what all that stuff. So they won't grow in any other conditions.
Yep. One of the things that as I've gotten further and further along with this that I've had to do is I had to learn how to identify a lot of different trees. Because if you don't know the tree, especially when you're messing with the bolete species, boletes, if you don't know the tree, if you don't know what direction they're facing, if you don't know how far down into the ground it is, you cannot properly identify the bolete. You have to know all of that in order to get a 100% identification on a bolete. It's crazy the amount of detail that you need in order to be 100% on some mushrooms. Others, chicken of the woods, you're not going to mistake that. You're not going to mistake an orange top, a yellow bottom. When you slice it, it's going to extrude yellow tears. It's going to extrude a yellow substance. If it has those characteristics, you've got chicken. And it's growing on wood. There's not anything else that's going to do all of those things. There's nothing else that will. But there are about 10,000 different ground boletes. And they grow in the same place and they grow at the same time and unless you know, there's some mushrooms that you can't identify without a microscope. because you have to be able to look at that fine of a detail in order to be certain. Some of them you have to spray and see how they react to ammonia in order to be 100% about their identification. And honestly, those are the ones that I'm not there yet. I'm not going there. I don't mess with Russellas. I don't mess with that family of mushrooms, and I don't mess with the family that shares the destroying angel, which is Amanitas. I don't mess with Russellas, and I don't mess with Amanitas because there's just too many of them that will make you sick that look too much like ones that won't. So I've never tried in the 100 that I've told you that I've had. I've never tried anyone in those two families. Two genuses. Sorry, I do that every time. I will not try those ones because I cannot be 100%, and I don't have the equipment to be 100% about it because those require a microscope and a series of chemicals to be able to tell.
I have quite a few mushrooms that grow in my yard and around my compost and stuff like that. I don't eat any of them because I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that they aren't ones you can eat because if they grow in that type of substrate, they probably aren't ones that you can eat. Or if you can eat them, they don't taste good. Because that's the other part of this too, is there's a lot of mushrooms out there that it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to make you sick, but it's going to taste like crap.
Yeah.
There's one called a deer. Oh God, we look at it. Platterfuls is one of their names, and they are huge and they're really tall and they grow in the spring. You find them everywhere in the woods, and they are saprophytics. They grow off of wood, and you can eat them, but they smell like a wet dog. No, I've never eaten them because I don't even want to mess with them. But they're cool to find. I mean, because they're huge. They're huge mushrooms. But nope, starvation maybe. But I'm not there yet.
I think that some of them that grow in my yard on the edge of the mulch pile and stuff like that are ink spots.
Oh, ink.
They're
Yep.
quite tall, and the tops of them are kind of like a cone,
Mm-hmm.
and then they turn black and slimy.
So those are shaggy names most likely.
Oh.
If they're really tall like this.
No, they're only.
Oh, they're really
about
small
like
ones?
this. Yeah.
Oh no, that would probably most likely be a shaggy name. And those are edible. But here's the thing about that family. If you enjoy alcohol at all, stay away from them because there's one of the whole genus. I did it again. I said family. One of the whole genus that if you mix it with alcohol, even after 4 or 5 days, like I'm saying, you haven't had one beer in 5 days, you're going to get sick.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So that's another one but it is called an inky on purpose because it is a way to make ink.
Oh.
And what they're actually doing, that is how they spread their spores. They're self digesting. They're eating themselves, and that inky goop, that's how their spores spread.
Oh.
Isn't that? I'm fascinated by mushrooms.
Really, that is fascinating. I just thought that they were, beyond spore and rotting. That's why they were eating.
Yep, they don't spore. They instead, that's how they spore. They turn into that soup.
Oh,
I know, right? But they are edible, and they're actually quite delicious. I've had
that's okay.
Mica caps are another one in that same family that grow on trees all over the place, and you can watch them. They're the ones that all of a sudden you'll see a tree covered in brown mushrooms, and then like 2 days later, that's just black slime going all the way down it. Yeah, those are called mica caps, and those aren't bad either, but it's not like I have to go out and eat it. But those are in my 100 that I've tried where they're not terrible, they're not awful, but not ones.
What are the ones that get really big? They almost look like the chicken, but they're kind of a grayish brown. And I've seen lately artists doing pictures on it and stuff. They're big.
So there's several different Ganodermas, and they're like on a living tree or on a recently dead tree or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually called artist conchs. So the spore surface on them, they're a type of polypore Ganoderma. Nope, not coming to me. Sorry, but artist conch is the common name for them. My husband knows all the science names. I'm embarrassing when it comes to those kind of things. But in that spore structure will allow you to write in them, and it'll stay.
Mm-hmm.
A very good friend of mine, he's an amazing artist. That's what he did for his mom for what would have been his parents' 70th wedding anniversary. We got him one like this, and he drew a family portrait with dad still in it, and with his brother's still in it, and him and his sisters all in it, and all the grandkids and everything. It was beautiful. So it'll last forever in that artist pond, but it's still a piece of nature because they're very into nature. So yes, it was really cool. But yeah, those are really neat. Actually, if you're ever in Faulkner Park, if you're looking at the park coming into it from Richard Avenue, and you're going down that road, there's the path that goes up into the woods there before you actually get into the park. If you take that path and you go all the way to the back of it, there's a huge tree trunk there that has artist conchs that are absolutely massive on them. And that is one of my favorite places to take a picture of my daughter. I have pictures of her from when she was really little, growing up under it and watching the mushroom grow. And just this last year, she actually stood on top of it.
Oh, wow.
And she weighs 130 pounds. She's not a little girl, and she was standing on it, no problem. And we took a picture of her.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, there were more pictures that were supposed to be on here, but my phone was not cooperating with me. But yeah, they're pretty cool. There's a lot of those different Ganodermas.
Yeah.
Tongue seed, that's it. Sorry. At the end, when it wasn't necessary anymore. But yeah, and none of those are like poisonous, but it's wood.
You know what I was just gonna say, they look so woody.
Mhm.
But I don't think you're right.
They were used as like a way to keep bugs away. You throw them in the fire and they let out a nice sweet smelling white smoke. So it's not a smoke that bothers us, but it keeps the bugs away.
I remember that.
Yep. A lot of the ones that are shelf mushrooms like that are hard. I thought you were going to be talking about Berkeley's polypore. So down on the ground, they'll grow a shelf like that. Most commonly is the one people think is chicken of the woods, but it's on the ground. It's not on the wood. And that's a Berkeley's polypore. And when they're tiny, they're cute, they're little, and they're actually pretty decent tasting. They're not bad, but they'll get massive, massive, massive. I found one in Long Point, actually, that was up in a tree, which I've never seen that before, but there had to have been dirt up there. And it looked like it was trying to be a canopy on the tree. It was huge. It had to have been 10 feet across. It was massive.
Wow.
Never seen one that big ever. This was a really strange year for mushrooms. They did a lot of crazy stuff that I've never seen before. Like I said, a chicken in May. Never have I seen that in 14 years. So yeah, mushrooms had a weird year this year, no doubt.
So when you go to the grocery store and you buy a little package of mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
how are they grown?
They are grown on manure. They are grown on animal waste. Yep. They're grown on animal waste mixed with straw that's been pasteurized. So it's clean. I'm not saying you're literally eating poop because they can't. It has to be pasteurized. But it is animal waste that they are grown on. That's why if you ever go down to Pennsylvania to see where all of those, the White Moon farm and that kind of stuff, it stinks to high heaven down there. And that is why, because they are grown on animal waste. Those are the agaricus species. That is not what I do.
Yeah. Well, when you bring that home, should you wash them?
Yes. Yep. I would wash them. I always wash them before. But honestly, your best thing to do is just take a damp paper towel, because when you wash them, you're letting them absorb a ton of water, and then you're not going to be able to get as good of a flavor out of them.
And the black sort of dirt,
That's animal waste.
okay.
It's just animal waste that's been processed to the point where it's not going to hurt you. You can eat it. I mean,
I start sawdust and Parmesan cheese.
exactly. Mhm. I grew up on a dairy farm. You think there's never been something to come in here that shouldn't have? You're out of your tree. But
Same here.
yep, it is what it is. But that is, yes, they're grown on animal waste. They are decomposers. And that's portobellas. That's white button mushrooms. Yep, they're agaricus species. So that's how they're grown, not on wood. They're not grown like this. This is an artificial log, basically, so. But please take them out of the plastic as soon as you can, because they need to breathe.
Do you keep them in the refrigerator?
Yes, but in a
Unwrapped.
unwrapped and preferably in a paper bag. Yep, they need to breathe. They breathe oxygen just like we do, and they're suffocating in there. I want to cry every time I see mushrooms wrapped in plastic. It really bothers me because I know it's not good for them. It's just not good for them. All you're doing is harboring all of the nastiness that could possibly be coming out of them. Yeah, they breathe oxygen just like we do, and they breathe out carbon dioxide just like we do.
Cheese bag.
Yep.
But I've grown my onions and garlic, so I store them in it's cheesecloth bag, not a cheesecloth bag, just muslin bags.
Mm-hmm.
That would probably work.
Yep, those are not bad for mushrooms either. Anything that can breathe. Paper bags are the best just because they absorb the water so nicely from them. You know what I mean? Like they absorb the water, but at the same time they give it back. And the other crazy thing about mushrooms is they're still growing. Even though they've been picked, they're still growing. I've literally had mushrooms grow into a paper bag before. Like start growing on the side of the paper bag and spreading their mycelium out just like they would if I was cloning them. They do just like this inside of the paper bag because they are still alive. Even once they've been picked, even after the substrate's been cut off, they're still a living thing. It's not unlike any other plant like that. It's not like an animal where once we're ready to eat it, it's been dispatched. It's not true of plants and fungus. They are still alive.
So when you say you put them outside because they produce their own vitamin D, is that for like our nutritional value?
Yep.
Or for the mushroom lasting or?
No, it's for our nutritional value. It just increases their viability for you. And another thing is you shouldn't eat raw mushrooms. People like to put them in their salads and whatnot. You really shouldn't. They have a cell structure that's more similar to a plant, where you're not getting the full nutrition out of them. In order to extract all of the beta glucogens, which is the most beneficial parts of a mushroom, you need to cook them. You really do. I know. I'm not saying they're not, but
Other plastic and ingredient.
yep, but you really should cook them. You get way more nutritional benefits out of cooking them than you do by eating them raw. Yep. Like especially the lion's mane and hericium, that those are the ones that or in the bear's head tooth that everybody's researching right now. If you're not cooking them, you're not getting the full benefit from them by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, there's two different types of extraction. There's a water extraction and an alcohol extraction. People who do like the medicinal end of it, the turkey tail is the only one that's been double-blind studied, researched. So I should make sure I say that. On cancer in the way that it helps people who are dealing with cancer. They did a just simple water extract. They did a water extract. They did an alcohol extract, and then they did both. And they did a placebo of patients going through chemo and how that it benefited them. And this was a large study. This was like something like 10,000 people in North America, so Canada, the U.S. and Mexico. The people who got the placebo did the worst. The people who got the water extraction did about 20% better. The people who got the alcohol extraction only did about 10% better. But the people who got the extraction that was both water and alcohol did 40% better than the people who got the placebo on the treatment of chemo, in making them feel better, in their healing and everything, and from that turkey tail, because it has the highest amount of beta glucogens of any of them. But it's that double extraction process that really pulls absolutely everything out of a mushroom you can possibly get out of it. That being said, I don't do a lot of alcohol extractions. I do one with turkey tail, chaga, and reishi. Those are the three that I do alcohol extractions with. But that's just for my family. I don't sell those or anything like that. Everclear, I would recommend. That's the best one commercially available for alcohol extractions.
Is that like a tincture? Is
Yeah.
that what you're talking about?
Yep, but a tincture that's using both water and alcohol extractions. Most tinctures are only one or the other. But if you can do both, then you're getting everything that you can get out of the mushroom. So if you have somebody preparing you tinctures, ask them if they can do both extractions. Most people will, because the water one's easy. It's 20 minutes of boiling. The alcohol one is the one that takes a little bit more knowledge and know-how. But yeah. Happy to answer anything. Like I said, we're just scratching the surface, ladies. I'm a little bit sick with this stuff. I do have my business cards, and these mushroom blocks are up for sale if anybody's interested. And anybody want to pick a mushroom? No, nobody wants to pick it. You'll pick it.
Yeah, why not?
All right. So, I suggest you grab it 2 hands.
You want me to pick the whole thing?
Yes.
The
Grab
whole thing off
Yep.
of there.
2
Okay.
hands. Rip it.